It's time for Positively Kansas. Coming up, it's a trip back in time to the days when they were teenagers. These Wichita natives have published a book of poetry they wrote 50 years ago. And now they're on a nationwide search to find their long-lost classmate whose poems are also included in the book. Maybe you can help. Plus, we have a Wichita destination that's sure to amaze. There aren't many places you can see a Tyrannosaurus Rex, but one lives here. Learn about it. And it's true, birds of a feather do flock together. Discover why that's an important means of survival in this week's Kansas Wild Edge Report. I'm Sierra Scott. We'll have those stories and more in this edition of Positively Kansas.
Positively Kansas is brought to you in part by Visit Wichita, bringing you Wichita destinations on Positively Kansas. Wichita, the heart of the country.
Before investing your hard-earned money, make sure your financial advisor understands your objectives. Mark Douglas, CFP, serving our community for over 20 years, providing customized financial solutions that focus on the individual.
Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Kansas serves more than 930,000 Kansans in various programs. Independent, member-owned. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Kansas, an independent licensee of Blue Cross and Blue Shield Association, supports KPTS.
Program support provided by the F. Price Kosman Memorial Trust, Entrust Bank Trustee, bringing you the Kansas Wild Edge segments on Positively Kansas.
They came of age in a time when the world seemed on the brink of nuclear war. Poetry was a popular form of expression for young people in the 1950s, pondering the meaning of life. Jim Grayway has the story of some Wichitans who are now publishing their teenage poems from 50 years ago and searching for a long-lost classmate who's one of their co-authors.
It was a graceful, slender spire, black as the light of the dark star fire.
Today is the present, yesterday is the past, tomorrow is the future. But I thought to myself, where is the future?
These are the words of teenagers as expressed by men who are now in their late 70s. Stephen Hawkins, Ralph Hollis, and Janet Bramall wrote this poetry 60 years ago when they were students at Wichita's Southeast High School.
My inspiration, I think, for writing poems was teenage angst.
Every generation of teens searches for identity and meaning, but in the 1950s and 60s, poetry became a popular form of expression for young people as the Beat movement rose to prominence. It was a rebellious counterculture phenomenon led by writers such as Allen Ginsberg, William Burroughs, and Jack Kerouac. And Southeast High English teacher Lee Strife, in his 20s at the time, used it to inspire his students.
The soul is the yearner and not the mind. The soul is the needer. It wants, it fears. For the mind is merely a sad machine, and only the heart cries tears.
The poems are a reflection of life in Wichita through youthful eyes during that period just a decade after the end of World War II.
It was all about airplanes, the Cold War, threat of mass destruction, mutual assured destruction. Wichita was a target because of all the aircraft industry and stuff. And I think that had a pretty strong influence on our thinking and our fears for the future.
They originally published this collection of poems themselves, using a device called a spirit duplicator.
The original book, we ran off about 80 copies, and we sold them in the hallways of Southeast High School for about $1 each, and they sold out in about an hour.
It kind of depends on what day I read it. Some day I read some of the poems I wrote and I feel like they're really brilliant, and then other days I look at it and say, holy cow, this is not that good.
My trembling fingers felt the book, picked up the book, shivering violins in chorus shook the air. Well, I think it was more getting our feelings out, especially at that age. We weren't sophisticated enough to try to make a message there for the world. The world was crushing in on us, so we needed some form of expression.
Now Hollis and Hawkins are republishing the book with purple ink, just as it would have looked in 1958, hot off the school's ditto machine. Meanwhile, the book's third poet, their classmate Janet Bramall, has become something of a mystery.
We've tried finding her. We don't know if she's still living, and I hope we do find her, because it would be good to connect again.
These two lifelong friends are hoping their book gets enough attention that Bramall, if she's still out there, will make contact. Meanwhile, they believe the book will be of value to readers today.
I think there might be some historical or cultural significance to it that might be of interest to other people, especially people in Wichita.
I started to scream, "Take the money instead. You can have it, for after all, what good are minds?"
It is a glimpse into the minds of a generation of young people who are now old. A chance to consider how similar or different they were from the youth of today, and whether their dreams and fears, as expressed eloquently in verse, ever came to pass. In Wichita, I'm Jim Grayway for Positively Kansas.
In 2016, Jim produced a KPTS documentary about the impact young Wichita poets of the 1950s and 60s had on the Beat generation nationwide. The film is titled Wichita Vortex and is available to watch on YouTube, and it's also available on DVD at kpts.org. What stood 20 feet tall, weighed 30,000 pounds, and might have eaten you if you'd been around 68 million years ago? His name is Ivan the T-Rex, and he helps make the Museum of World Treasures a Wichita destination well worth visiting. Here's Brian Ramsdale with the story.
I was very surprised how big it was. My first thought was, its arms are so little, why would they have arms? Because they're very short.
He is certainly one of the top 10 specimens in the world ever discovered.
It is interesting to look at Ivan and how large he is. He was so large that you notice that his tail actually had to be tucked in over under the second floor over here.
Not many cities get to claim being the home of a dinosaur, and even fewer cities can claim a T-Rex. In Wichita, there's definitely something to see.
You come around the corner and you see a T-Rex, things that you've just seen in a book before maybe, or for those maybe who've been fortunate to travel, they might have seen one before, but the expression on kids' faces, you know, and the joy of the parents experiencing that with their children.
Ivan the T-Rex came to the Museum of World Treasures several years ago and now is a permanent display.
It's just hard to compare anything in the current age to a T-Rex.
It is fun here at the museum that Ivan can be seen on two different levels. There's the ground floor where you see him when you first come into the museum, and then up above, the second floor where we were, where you can get almost a top-down and sometimes a larger view of him.
Stephen King isn't only a scientist, but also used to give tours at the museum. He says Ivan has something really unique.
Ivan is about 41-42% complete, which sounds like it's much less. It's not. To put that in some perspective, Ivan's about the 8th most complete Tyrannosaurus skeleton known. It's one thing to look up at the skeleton and see how big it is and see how large that is, but it's another thing for, as I said, especially little children to walk right up to that cast of Ivan's femur right there, his upper leg bone, and to see just how big that is.
This isn't the only fun thing about Ivan at the museum. There's a special learning room just for kids.
This is Ivan's playhouse here.
All sorts of learning opportunities, from fun to funky, can happen in this neat room.
Providing educational experiences outside of the classroom, and especially with your family, is just so important and so meaningful.
molding the minds of the next generation and leaving them in awe. And if a millions-of-year-old dinosaur can help spawn that, those teeth look a little less menacing.
People are finding more and more reasons to just kind of come and hang out, and especially with young kids, you want to introduce them into museums in bite sizes. You don't want to do the adult experience with young kids. No pun intended on the bite size.
Next week's Wichita Destination is a coffee shop unlike any other, serving up great experiences in the historic Delano district. Well, they're a favorite of hunters and connoisseurs of wild cuisine, but just like any other creature, they strive to survive and fend off predators. In this week's Kansas Wild Edge report, Mike Blair shows us what life is like for the Kansas bobwhite.
The cheery spring call that gives the bobwhite its name is familiar to most heartlanders. This quail is a prized game bird, living roughly throughout the eastern half of the U.S. Plump, wary, and well-colored to hide in its surroundings, it prefers habitats where grasslands meet open woodlands. It likes short grass situations and is well known as a prairie dweller in the western half of its range. The bobwhite is a ground bird, seldom seen in trees. It's a speedy runner and, where possible, escapes danger by fleeing on foot. But it's also a fast and powerful flyer, bursting from cover in explosive eruptions. Normal flight is usually limited to short distances between food and roosting cover. Male and female bobwhites are similar in size, but slightly different colored. Males have bold black and white facial markings. Females have buff-colored faces that better blend into nesting cover. Except for nesting season, bobwhites move in groups called coveys. Coveys feed and roost together, utilizing many pairs of eyes to watch for danger. These birds are tasty and a favorite prey of birdhawks, bobcats, and even man. As they feed, at least a few birds are always on sentry. This changes moment to moment as the covey travels. The bobwhite's coloration is perfect camouflage for winter grasses. That's important since thin vegetation after the lush growth of summer makes them easier to spot. Their first line of defense is to freeze in place, letting mottled feathers blend them into backgrounds. Only when discovery is imminent will they flee. Quail feed on a variety of foods, picking seeds, berries, and waste grains from crop fields. They also eat insects and small arthropods, scratching through duff to find protein at the soil surface. Main feeding periods are morning and late afternoon. But the birds constantly peck edibles whenever they find them. Watching these shy game birds court, fight, and nest is always rewarding. Hens nest several times each summer and ground nest near openings like roads or fields. Clutch size is large, up to 20 eggs or more. But in drought, hatchlings can be few. In early fall, bobwhites join into social groups of more than 20 birds. These move back and forth as they encounter other coveys. Eventually, the average wintering covey pairs down to about a dozen quail. Good habitat is essential in helping bobwhites survive the winter, and those that make it ensure each spring is a new chapter for these amazing birds. I'm Mike Blair for Positively Kansas.
Now to some other wild animals that are actually native to Africa. Nevertheless, they thrive here, and they occupy an interesting niche in Kansas agriculture.
The name of our company is Long Neck Ranch Incorporated. Well, why not? Ostrich farming's perfect, right? Stan, my uncle, he met somebody that was doing it back in the 90s, and it seemed like a pretty good idea to get into.
I had a small acreage, and I could put a lot of birds on small acreage instead of trying cattle or hogs.
We sell the eggs, we sell the meat, we sell the hides.
On the meat itself, it is 99% fat-free, because on an ostrich, the fat is on the outside instead of marbled in like beef. It's the same color and has the same taste as beef, but the fat's on the outside, so it's the only red meat recommended by heart doctors.
You would think that being from a climate that they're normally from, they'd have trouble here, but they've really adapted to the winters well, and the summers really don't faze them at all. For the first 2 months, that's really the hard part, is once they hatch and getting them to be about 2 months old. Once they're 2 to 3 months old, they're pretty hardy, and then usually it's just something freak where, you know, maybe they eat too much sand, and or we get a coyote or something like that. But once they get past 3 months, we're pretty good. It was a family business from the very, very beginning. I think it makes it bigger, because it makes it way better, because we're all invested, and it's easy to talk to each other. And I'm sure there's pitfalls with some family businesses, but for ours it seems to work out good.
And now even your daughter's getting involved.
She is. She loves coming out and helping out, and Stan's kids also help out, and they all love it. They come out and feed, and they like to show their friends, but you know, there's a lot of hard work out here, and they don't really shy away, so it's fun to get them involved.
Well, it's different than anything else, and it's really exciting because most people don't get to have this experience, so it's really fun just doing something different than anybody else. Okay, so this one is 4 days old, and this one is 2, and they're just really cute. Here's their little head, and their feathers are like kind of like hedgehog-like, and because they're not all spread out yet, so they're like really thick and not like furry yet.
Well, we need more production, but it does run into a lot of work, and you've got to be patient, and Mother Nature's got to cooperate with you. Eggs are good to eat, and the girls in Las Vegas like the feathers, and meat's healthy for you.
The ostrich meat is sold at Crable's Specialty Meats in McPherson.
Hello everyone, I'm Anthony Powell. Hey, don't adjust your set. Sierra is still here. She's just moved over to the interviewee seat. Usually she's of course doing the interviews herself, but I wanted to talk to you about your incredible personal achievements over the last 3 years. You've now won 3 national pageants, just incredible. The latest being Miss America Elite out in Southern California earlier this year. How have you done it? I mean, you're in great shape. We know that.
Thank
but
you.
These pageants, there's a lot to them, you've told me.
There really are. And one of the things I think people have a misconception that it's all about looks. And that does play into it because they want you to be physically fit. But they also want you to be mentally fit and spiritually fit. So it's really what I call the best self-improvement course in the world, because it forces you to be the best you can be in every single avenue. And you also, on top of all of that, have to do a lot of community service. And I already do that, so it's easy for me, but they wanted you to do at least 100 appearances in a year. And
wow.
I actually made 200.
Wow.
Think about 365 days.
No wonder I could never get a hold of you.
That's exactly. We play phone tag a lot.
Yes, yes. What a schedule. What motivated you to want to take this on? I mean, there's a lot to do. Like you said, getting ready physically, spiritually, mentally.
Yeah.
It's a big to-do list.
Well, I have to say thank you to Robert Greene, and you know Robert Greene.
I know Robert.
He's got to have somebody to whip you into shape.
That's right.
And really, that was a lot of it. I really like to challenge myself more than anything, and so life has gone along fine. I didn't, I could have just sat back and said life is good, but I thought, you know what, I like to constantly put goals up there that I need to reach and achieve. And so I just thought, when I was turned 53, I thought I've always wanted to do a national pageant, have never done it. And I thought, what the heck, what do I have to lose, right? And so I entered the first pageant, that was Ms. United States, not thinking that I'd win it. And I'm competing against 30-year-olds, by the way. I was the oldest one. I was like the grandma of this whole group.
You told me some NFL cheerleaders.
Oh, yeah. There were NFL cheerleaders. There was an attorney. There was a chiropractor. These women were very accomplished, very articulate, very involved in their community, again, because they require community service. So it was really interesting when I got there, and I thought, I'm not going to win this thing, but you know what? I'm good with that. If I just make top 15, I'll be happy. I'll go home and I'll be happy. So they announced the top 15, I'm in it, and I thought, great, okay, that's all I wanted to do. So we have to go back through a couple competitions to then go to the top 10, and they announced me in the top 10, and I thought, well, that's icing on the cake, game on. That's better than I thought I'd do. Then they go to announce the top 5, I'm in that too. And they go to announce them the runners up, and they go down the list, and they get to me, and I'm still standing there with the last person. I thought, did they forget I'm up here? And I ended up winning it.
Unbelievable.
So.
I know the most important thing for you is what you're doing with your platform.
Right.
I remember the touching story you told me visiting a young girl in the hospital, and she said, look, Mom, a real life princess. Tell us about your platform and what you're doing with these wins that you've achieved.
Well, the one thing I wanted to do was be able to speak to children from the age of 2 to adults to the age of 100. And so I had to come up with a topic that I thought would be relevant. Now, I've had skin cancer, and I have a couple of scars on my face. I've had 8 removed so far. But I thought skin cancer is kind of a narrow topic, and to address a 4-year-old child with skin cancer, they're not really going to understand that. So I changed it to show your scars, because all of us have scars.
Sure.
Especially,
whether they be emotional or physical.
Right, exactly.
Right.
And children in hospitals, especially if they've had cancer or had some surgeries, they might have a trach scar or something like that. I tell them to turn them into warrior wounds. And rather than hide them and be ashamed of them, we should share them. And that's what makes us inspirational and motivational.
Right. So what's the one message you want people to come away with about achieving? As you said, you just set out, you wanted to challenge yourself.
Right. I think if you've got a dream, don't sit on it. Because what I did when I was 50, I actually wanted to compete when I was 50, and I didn't. Because you know what I was afraid of? What people would think. What if I lost? Would people think less of me? Would people laugh about it? Would my TV show be worth less? Would fewer people watch it? And so I waited 3 years, and I finally realized I just need to do this. And I think if somebody has a dream, don't wait. Just go for it.
And I love the fact that you are proud of your age. You don't shy away from telling people how old you are. It's great.
56 and going strong.
Looking great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sierra. So great, and I'm so proud of your achievements, and you're such a positive influence on Wichita and all of Kansas and all around the country.
And so are you. So I appreciate you. I'm glad we're friends.
Yeah, likewise.
Well, that's a wrap for this week. Positivelykansas@kpts.org is our email if you have a story idea. We always need them. Join us again next time for another half hour of information and inspiration on Positively Kansas. So long.
Program support provided by the F. Price Kosman Memorial Trust, Entrust Bank trustee, bringing you the Kansas Wild Edge segments on Positively Kansas.
Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Kansas serves more than 930,000 Kansans in various programs. Independent, member-owned. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Kansas, an independent licensee of Blue Cross and Blue Shield Association, supports KPTS.
Before investing your hard-earned money, make sure your financial advisor understands your objectives. Mark Douglas, CFP, serving our community for over 20 years, providing customized financial solutions that focus on the individual.
Visit Wichita, bringing you Wichita Destinations on Positively Kansas. Wichita, the heart of the country.